All right, so one of our first questions that we wanted to start off with seems very technical from the outset, but it's something that I think a lot of students kind of hear about on like Reddit or Discord, and they like want to know what's up. And that's about CCS scheduling privileges and the ways in which like that's different from the rest of UCSB students. And so we can elaborate on that a little bit. I'll kind of give you a breakdown. So CCS scheduling privileges allow students to make changes to their schedule really late, later than the rest of UCSB students. And this includes making grading option changes, so going from a letter grade to pass, no pass, or even choosing to drop a class on the last day of instruction. So not at the end of final exams, you don't have your final grade in hand yet, but the day that classes are finished. Is when students are able to decide if they want to make any additional changes to remove something from their schedule. And so this has pedagogical purposes. And I think, Claudia, you wanted to be able to speak about that, about the purpose of that privilege.
I was just going to mention that it's essentially a graduate student kind of privilege. And the reason is not so that you can ditch any classes that, you might get a C in, but instead to allow you the chance to take courses maybe that are even beyond your current capacity, but because we really want to encourage you to take risks. And this is one little safety net that we can provide to encourage you to take those risks. Maybe take on a class that you're not sure if you're going to really manage or not. And so it is a privilege for sure, but it's also an opportunity. I think many students do decide to not drop that class, but it's there for you in case you need it so that you push yourselves. And that's a pretty amazing part about CCS, is this encouragement to push yourself and ways that can work for you.
I wanted to elaborate too about priority registration. So one of the things that's currently going on that you as the incoming class will sort of be the first students to experience is that the entire university, UCSB, is making changes to their priority registration system. And this is to really help ensure that all students can have access to really the minimum number of classes that they need, making sure that all students, regardless of potential honors status or things like that, would be able to enroll in at least 12 units. And this will be affecting CCS students as well, but one of the things that's going on is LNS honors students going forward won't have priority registration. CCS students will still have a form of priority registration, but it will be changing. So I just wanted to make sure that, if you have any questions about this, you can talk to us. The details are, I think, still being sort of scrubbed out, but I know it's been sort of talked about on Discord and things like that. And I wanted to take a moment to explain that here. Basically, CCS students going forward will have the opportunity to register slightly ahead of their cohort in terms of their peers. So for CCS first years, maybe registering in front of other first years, but maybe not ahead of juniors and seniors. So you'll be kind of parallel with the people that you are coming in to UCSB with. But the purpose of this priority registration isn't that you are inherently, more amazing than other UCSB students. It's that CCS students often are taking advanced classes and need to be able to access those classes in order to make progress in their major. And so as we were talking with the Vice Chancellor and various other people, we were making the case that CCS students really do pursue these advanced classes, and that level of priority registration helps them make sure that they can complete their degree as intended. So wanted to speak to that privilege as well. Before we move on. I know these are all very kind of technical things about being at CCS, but I think we wanted to just kind of make sure that we get to some of those burning topics. So the next one is more universal, but very still CCS, and it's about our GE requirements. and to talk about sort of what they are. I think we can start with Megan and then move on to Claudia.
Yeah, so CCS GEs are very, very different from probably what you've seen and looked at as far as just like the general UC and other colleges that you may have applied to. But basically, if you are familiar with the A through G program that is spoken about a lot across campus, CCS students don't do the A through G program. It's 10 courses completely outside of the major and broadly distributed. And so that can look very, very different and does look very, very different between each student and between majors, because what is completely outside of an art major is going to be different from what's completely outside of the physics major. So very broad. So we ask our STEM students to just stay away from STEM. And we ask our art and music and writing students to stay away from classes that are directly informing their art, their music, their whatever they're writing about. And so a lot of the GEs and how a GE is approved goes through myself and Savannah, the staff advisors, as well as your faculty advisor. So you could ask your faculty advisor, hey, I'm Megan and I'm an art student and I want to take a reading about art class. You ask your faculty advisor and they're like, yeah, that's totally outside of your area of art. That's fine with me. Then you ask myself and Savannah and we're like, but that is pretty in line with what you're doing. So it's not actually a GE for you, but it could be one of the two GEs that is slightly related to your major. So they're pretty broad, and that's on purpose, and that's to allow you to like go out, look at what the whole general catalog is offering and be able to pick classes pretty freely. Yeah. Claudia, yeah.
Well, I was actually, instead of the mechanics, which I think Megan, you just did perfectly, I was going to talk about the why, but maybe we should let, I know that Michelle and Claire were going to talk about the why, maybe. Do either of you want to go first, and then I'll step in with the faculty perspective.
Yeah, I could start. I've had a really fun time taking my GEs because they're totally unrelated to biology. Like in fall quarter, I took a comparative literature class, vegan literature, and I also took a class in art history, which is like sustainable architecture. So those might not count if you're an art major or a writing and lit major, but since I'm a bio major, that counts for me. And I've been able to take all my GEs as upper divs, and since we're not doing LNS GEs, they're not in the A to G area requirements. So sometimes I'm the only like non-major student in that class for like history majors. And I go talk to the professor and they're like, oh, why are you taking this class? And I'm like, I'm just interested in what I saw on the course list or gold. And I've been able to really explore different topics, totally unrelated to my major. So it's a nice break from all the science that I typically have to do. Some really fun classes I've taken are food history in the history department, the history of wealth and poverty. I've taken Chinese religion classes, and I've really appreciated all the freedom and just being able to explore different topics. Yeah.
I definitely agree with what Michelle had to say. I think that at least as a biology major, GEs, so I've mostly taken classes in history and Spanish and writing, and all of those are just other interests that I have other than biology, and sometimes they kind of inform biology. Like right now I'm taking a history class and it's on the Darwinian Revolution. So it's very much kind of sciencey, but it is a history class in the history department, but a lot of times they're totally unrelated and just another interest that I have. And they can be really nice in terms of kind of balancing out your workload, because sort of the rhythm of a biology class or any STEM class is really different than the rhythm of a humanities class. it's a lot more reading and writing. And so I find that they can really help to sort of balance both like what you're doing intellectually, but also just the kind of work that you're doing. So you're not taking 4 STEM classes at once and everything's based on midterms and memorizing facts or whatever it is. Yeah, and then the particularly nice thing about CCS GEs is because you aren't following like a kind of rigid structure of having to check off boxes, you can really go for the things that you're interested in outside of your major, which is why I've been able to take a bunch of history classes and a bunch of Spanish classes and fulfill my requirements and get sort of a deeper knowledge of each of those other things that I'm interested in.
And I think the only thing I'll add is that, one of our goals for you is to, it's interesting because in CCS, most of you come in having something that you really are into. It's one of the things that attracted us, I think, to you is that you kind of know what is your thing. But GEs are the chance to see what else it is about you that is still you, learning about food history or about the Darwinian Revolution or, Spanish or any of these other things are still there too. And secretly, they are also teaching you about how other disciplines think. How do they come? They think about questions totally different than I do. They do their research in totally different ways. They write really in different ways. And so coming out of your undergraduate education with your thing, but also an understanding of how more broadly people pursue their academic interests is cool. And another trick is that you may well discover some previously known passion for some other area. Wow, I really do love gamelan music or, something. And so, being sort of pushed to think broadly in terms of GEs really has a lot of benefits.
I'll even add to that, Claudia. I think you beat me to my sort of surprise punch. But part of the part of the point and goal of GEs for many of our faculty is that there are interdisciplinary benefits to be had for students in taking coursework in subjects that maybe they weren't anticipating. Just new ways of thinking about things. New ways of engaging with your writing, your reading, your analysis, just new skills that will help you become a better scholar in your own field. And, potentially if you are interested in that academic track, potentially a better colleague in the future, or even just someone who works well with others in terms of people who think differently from you. So the goal is to really get you into that mindset of looking at the value of other ways of thinking and taking advantage of those opportunities at the college level. And I'll add a technical point on that note as well. One of the things that's different about CCS GEs that I'll just add is that AP courses don't count for CCS GEs. And the point of that is that UCSB classes are really very broad in terms of subjects that you might never have seen before, and really an opportunity to explore some new things. So if you have taken classes at a community college, you can email us and we can talk to you through that process. But as far as AP classes go, those don't satisfy GE classes for CCS, but they still can, help you be prepared and they help count towards your degree as well. So they do move you closer to your graduation. All right. I think our next topic is moving on. For those of you who especially buy into the sort of interdisciplinary benefits and the idea that, oh, I love taking classes in more than one field. We had a lot of students who indicated that they were interested in talking about double majoring. Or, just things outside of their additional interest. But we wanted to answer the question about double majoring first, because I think that gets a lot of interest from CCS students. So we're going to do some sort of technical stuff first. And I think, Megan, if you want to lead us off, and then I'll follow up if there's anything to add there.
Yes. So the first like little question is how many students are double majors in CCS? We have out of like 430 students, approximately 40 double majors. And you do it by going to the department of which you want to join their major, not CCS, because you would already be a part of CCS, and finding out what is required from them to join that major. Sometimes there's a lengthy amount of prerequisite coursework that you need to complete before declaring that double major. That's that department's prerogative to put those rules in place, and you have to take those classes. And if that's a double major you want to pursue, that's up to you. One big thing that we like to emphasize to our students when thinking about doing a double major is it truly is 2 majors. It is double work. It is going to be hard, but if you are prepared for that and you plan and make sure that you are committed to the plan that you draw up, then it's not going to be that much work because you've prepared yourself for it. But if you go into it thinking, I can just do it, that might not be the best way to go into it. So knowing that it is truly double work, and that those are 2 things that you really want to pursue is a good way to start. You would need to, if the second major is in the College of Letters and Science, you would need to complete the A through G general education program because that's a requirement for LNS students. So those are some things that we ask our students to consider while they start their journey of a double major. And I believe on campus, you're not even allowed to declare it until your 2nd or 3rd quarter. So we definitely want you to get settled into the first major that you were admitted into and get going on that coursework and everything that's expected of your original major before even having those conversations and starting that paperwork. Because there is an adjustment when you come to a university, UCSB, compared to your high school. There is going to be a shift in expectation of work that you complete and the amount of time that it takes to complete that work. So we ask that students do spend that first quarter just being like, okay, this is how a university is different than high school, and then start thinking about pursuing a double major or some minors. And how can you plan for it effectively? I think I answered that. And there's a required portion of the form that you fill out where you are required to kind of plan out the rest of your quarters, the rest of your college career, and like really sit down and say, okay, in this quarter, these are the things that I'm going to check off. In this quarter, and you do that for every quarter. So they really do kind of force you to sit down and think about it. Is this something I want to pursue? If after filling out that, you're like, oh boy, that's a lot, then that's something to consider and sleep on it, you know? And maybe talk to an advisor and see, maybe talk to another student who's a double major and see like, oh, does it just look like it's a lot on paper and you handled this many courses and you can do it? So definitely keep in contact with advisors and your faculty advisor and your students that may be a year or 2 ahead of you. Use the resources that are available.
Yeah, and I think I'll add to that too, that, you know, part of the reason you have to sit down and really plan out your grid is that there are limits in place for how many courses can overlap between majors. So sometimes students say, well, you know, I've got this major and there's another major and a lot of the classes are the same. Can I maybe, you know, add like maybe just 6 more classes and then I'd have 2 majors, 2 degrees. It actually, there are rules in place that you can only really overlap 2 classes in that upper division level. So that is part of the, you know, it is double work because once you get up to those harder classes that take more time, there's a lot less overlap that you're allowed to do between those 2 majors. So so that's part of why talking to an advisor and really making that plan is important, because sometimes you might kind of not know that those rules are in place. And so taking the time to talk to someone who's, you know, we've been at UCSB for years, we've seen the run, and we can tell you, you know, what kind of concerns we might have for you on your behalf, what kind of questions we have for you. And you would talk to a faculty advisor too, because they've been advising students and they talk with you every quarter about how your course load's going, and they're going to want input on that, just to be able to check in on you and make sure you're doing okay. There's another question that pops up sometimes about being a double major within CCS, and that does happen. Not very often, but it does. And the part of the thing to know about that is that you have to apply to that second major as well. So it's not just, well, now that I'm in CCS, I'm going to add all the CCS majors that I want. You actually have to be admitted through the same application process to each major that you are interested in. So if you're a math student and you're thinking you want to be a CCS physics student too, guess what? You're applying to CCS physics, and you're going to see if you get in there. Heads up, those aren't very compatible like double majors because of how they're structured. Just want to put that out there, but that is something that exists. We have our first question in the chat. Within CCS, is there support and opportunities for learning about entrepreneurship? And is there an entrepreneurial spirit on campus? Honestly, it's a great question. There is a department that I do see some students take in terms of entrepreneurial kind of things. It's abbreviated TMP. I'm trying to remember what that stands, what that's sort of short for. Go ahead.
Technology management.
Aha. And so we do see some students take those classes to kind of pursue or add some entrepreneurial skills. I will say that I have noticed a lot of our CCS students, like CCS students especially, have an entrepreneurial spirit. I like that phrase. And, you know, these are students who are passionate about something that they're doing, whether it's by getting connected to programs that are already doing that, or potentially through blazing their own trail. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs and trailblazers as part of just the CCS community, as alumni, and even as current students. So that's a great question. And I think that's something that, you know, maybe it doesn't get characterized as a double major, but it is that kind of go get 'em attitude. So honestly, that's a great add-on. Claudia, I think we were going to ask you to elaborate just a little bit on that, you know, double majoring isn't expected, and get some of that wisdom in there.
I don't know about wisdom, but first I just want to say that one real advantage of CCS is, just as you've heard from Megan and Savannah, you have all these advisors, you know, for you. So you can have questions, you know, as you come in, can I do this double major? You don't have to make these decisions on your own. You have your peers to help you and peer advisors. You have the staff advisors, you have a faculty advisor. So it's pretty cool, you know, and they will kind of help you not say yes or no, but help you think through what the implications will be for these choices. The one thing I guess I wanted, well, maybe two things I wanted to say. One is that often students who come into CCS are attracted to CCS because it gives you the opportunity to really dive deep into what you are interested in. And sometimes it's hard to dive deep into two areas. You could dive deep in CCS and dive shallow, I guess, in something else. But you want to sort of ask yourself, do you really need that other major? And I'm saying this also as a parent. Probably you and your parents are the only people who are even going to know what it says on your diploma. But, you know, for sure, to pursue your passions. And, you know, you can say, I'm going to go for this double major. And if it doesn't work out in your senior year and you decide, you know, I don't want to take these other two requirements, that's fine. So you can plan ahead, just as Megan has described, and really kind of have your plan and then see how it works for you. I think the main thing is it's got to work for you. What I do see more from students is that they decide to do a minor. And that is still a little bit of a concentration in this other area that's really of interest. A little bit less of a commitment, you know, all of those things that Megan mentioned about if you decide to do a double major and that other major is in LNS, it means, okay, you got to do all of the LNS requirements. With the minor, there are less of those kinds of things. And so I do see that students kind of get a lot from, you know, choosing their fields and maybe pursuing a minor. And if it's okay, if I put something in the chat, in the catalog, there's a list of departments that offer minors, and I would say a large number. I don't know the number of students in CCS, but probably a fair number do pursue minors that are either like kind of directly related to what they're doing. I've had many of my biology students do a minor in statistics, or I think it's statistical science or education, but I've also had some do some, minor in religious studies. So it doesn't have to be exactly related. So I think that's the only thing I wanted to add.
No, I think that's great. And I think it is something that like a minor is a really great way to sort of have a secondary interest and to have a focus on that interest. That can take some time. I've met a number of students, not just at CCS, but just at UCSB in general, that do a minor for fun. It's just something that they're passionate about, and they enjoy how different it is from their normal classes. And it's just kind of a good constant way to change up what they're thinking about and to have kind of, a different set of assignments and expectations. If you're double majoring at L&S, can classes count for your GE requirement both there and at CCS? Yes. So GEs can overlap all day long. It's just that you kind of have to think about both simultaneously. So you're having to think about, is this unrelated to my major? So is CCS going to be okay with that? Versus does this fit into the area A through G plus world cultures plus European traditions plus all those kinds of additional requirements at L&S. So advisors are definitely a huge help in that regard, and to help think through that. Students honestly can be really good for just tips. And if you do double major at L&S, your AP classes will count for your L&S GEs, just not your CCS ones. We're going to get to student work-life balance in a little bit, I think, but I really appreciate that you're asking that. So on that topic, in terms of like pursuing additional interests, I think Claire and Michelle wanted to speak to that a little bit too. So like what kinds of outside interests do students pursue?
I can talk about that a little bit. So a lot of the really cool extracurricular things that I've gotten to do at UCSB have been biology proximate, which is awesome. And it's kind of allows me to think about biology and the ocean in a different way than I am in the classroom. So I'm part of the scuba and freediving club, and I work at the aquarium on campus, and I'm part of the Surfrider organization. And so all of those things are really fun and different than my classes, but kind of related to my major. And then some things I've been able to do totally outside of that. Up until this quarter, I was volunteering in a local classroom. So on Zoom, working with kids on kind of literacy. And that's just another interest that I have. And I found it really rewarding and fulfilling. And it was not really biology related at all. What other fun things? I got to take a soccer class. I played soccer in high school. And so you can take 4 credit for half a unit, which is not very much, but you can take kind of guided classes through the ENS major, I think. But basically they're run by DirectSen and you get units for it. And it's sort of a scheduled medium to play sports or take art classes, or there's like various things offered. I took a kickboxing class, which was really fun. So there's a lot of cool ways to kind of stay active and under non-corona circumstances take advantage of really the beautiful outdoors. And also we have a pretty stellar recreation facility.
Yeah, like what Claire touched on. It's like you're any other student at UCSB, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can pursue as many interests you already have or find new ones, like what Claire just left off on the RecSen. I started rock climbing there when coronavirus didn't happen yet. But yeah, a lot of my other friends in CCS also rock climb. I think it's like a big thing now, or it was becoming bigger and bigger. And like from rock climbing at the rec center to, I guess, the hills and mountainy areas behind UCSB, because we are located between the mountains and the ocean. That was really fun. And I have other friends who are like in CCS Bio who are on the mountain biking team and like volunteer at CBER, which is, I forgot what the acronym stands for, but it's like an on-campus conservation. Claudia might know what CBER stands for.
I was going to say it's the Cheadle Center for Biodiversity and Ecological Restoration.
Yes.
Mouthful.
Yeah, so I have other friends in like chemistry who do a lot of rock climbing, but also do rock research on campus. So there are friends who go surfing almost every day. You could do whatever you want on campus, off campus. You could just be focused on your schoolwork and your research and your more major related things, but basically whatever you want to do, there's opportunities to do so. And I think there are a lot of expectations you may place on yourself in terms of what you want to do in coursework and what you want to do related to your major, but I don't feel that pressure from like my faculty advisors, which I think we'll talk about in the next question, but it's basically what you want to do and what you are passionate about. You are totally able to do that. So, yeah.
And I think I'll just take a second. I'm going to condense maybe one of our future topics and say that one of the other things that we emailed you about was that we will have a student panel later with a string of CCS students, many of whom are active members of the community council, to answer questions sort of about student life and what it's like to be part of CCS. So if that is interesting for you, make sure you RSVP because we'll send out the information for that. And that is scheduled on Monday, April 19th from from basically 4 to 5. So, you know, if that's of interest to you, we will elaborate there. But one of the things we really do want to make sure we have time to talk about is a faculty advisor. And then a lot of you had questions about housing, so we will save that as our last question, and then maybe we'll go into some Q&A. But before we do that, let's just talk about what it's like to have a faculty advisor, because it's really unique to CCS. I think you'll find that at UCSB, the number of students in ratio to the number of faculty mean that students don't necessarily have tons of access to a faculty member's time and advice, but CCS is very different that way. So Claire or Michelle, I think you guys kind of volunteered to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, so just starting off with like some technical stuff, we are required to meet with we get assigned a faculty advisor, I guess, pretty much as soon as we start fall quarter. And we are required to meet with them at least once a quarter to talk about next quarter's courses and get like our course yellow slip signed. So every quarter we think of the courses we want to take for the next quarter, then we go to our faculty advisor, we talk to them about what courses we want to take, and they can sign off the sheet and we submit it to our advisors and we can register for classes. But that's more technical stuff. But most students, a lot of students meet with their advisor more than once a quarter just to like check in at times. But having a faculty advisor is great because a lot of CCS students are taking a lot of advanced coursework and even graduate student coursework that's very specific to our interests. So we don't really have like a checklist of courses to go down. So how do we figure out what we want to take? And that's kind of where the faculty advisor comes in. We tell them what our general interests related to our majors are, and because they've advised a ton of students in the past and they've been at the campus for a while, they know the courses, they were able to talk to older students and their experience in courses, so they give us recommendations on what's related to their interests, and that's been awesome. They can also connect you to other students who have done or who are interested in similar things, and you start building like your network and support system. So having a faculty advisor is just a great resource to like achieve a lot of major related things you want to do. And they're just a great support system as well, because my faculty advisor is Kathy Foltz, and I remember when I was applying to summer programs as well as grad school, she was a great source of advice for kind of like, what am I doing? Should I apply to these programs? And she's had students in the past who've had them, and she was able to talk to me about their experiences. I was able to ask her like, oh, I'm interested in these topics. Do you know any grad schools that would be good for that and what programs? And she was able to give me that advice as well. So having a faculty advisor has been really awesome. And it's just great to have like kind of a sounding board for like, oh, I'm thinking of doing these things. Like, what do you think? And yeah.
I absolutely agree. And before I say anything else, I will say full disclosure, Claudia is my faculty advisor. So she's here right now, but I would say all of this regardless. I have also had just an excellent experience with having a faculty advisor. I don't know that every advisor does this, but I get like a curated list of classes I might be interested in every quarter, which is fantastic and an amazing resource. And not only, I mean, so my freshman year, at least in the bio program, there's sort of this series of introductory classes, which was where I was introduced to Claudia and the rest of the CCS biology faculty. But getting to know faculty in general, calling faculty by their first names, was really great and sort of helped me feel comfortable within the biology department, because when I would be looking at the course list, I would be like, oh, I know that professor. They'll recognize my face, which is a big deal at a school as big as UCSB for professors to recognize you and know who you are. And particularly when you're taking upper division classes. So the first upper division class that I took my freshman year was Claudia's class. And that was kind of a perfect transition when I was a first year and most of the other people in the course were upperclassmen. That was a really nice kind of way to ease into things and then become super comfortable with taking upper division courses where a lot of the people had been at UCSB for much longer than I had. Also just very lovely to have one adult, many, because Savannah and Megan are also there and really helpful, but to have someone who kind of has your back, both academically and personally, and who you can kind of go to. Yeah, it's one of the best parts of CCS for sure.
All right. Not to give Claudia a pass on talking about faculty advisors, but I feel like you guys, that Claudia would probably insist that you hear from Michelle and Claire most. But we wanted to talk a little bit about housing, just because I know it's a big question for a lot of you guys. I'm sure Claire and Michelle are really thankful that like I'm not going to put them on the spot to tell you what's going on for fall quarter, but I'll tell you what I know. And that is basically the expectation is from the University of California president, Michael Drake, that fall quarter we will be resuming in-person instruction. And that basically the expectation is that students will be on campus. And that is based on, current estimations, vaccination rates, the general progress that we've been seeing in this pandemic. So the expectation is that there will be in-person classes in fall. They may or may not be offered remotely. And by May, I mean, that's even like the classes that are 800 people, right? They may have in-person components in terms of your sections, but a lot of those concrete details haven't been fleshed out yet. I know that's sort of frustrating. We find it frustrating that we don't have those details yet, but for those smaller classes, and CCS sort of specializes in smaller classes, those professors are likely very much looking forward to being back in the classroom and facilitating discussion again and having those kinds of interactions. So as CCS students, it's probably wisest to anticipate that you will be expected to be on campus for fall quarter. big asterisk after that, unfortunately, because we don't know, what the months ahead hold, but, and I know that we all find that very sort of overwhelming and frustrating after a year of saying that, but that I think is the best current advice I have. And then that kind of leads into housing. So the housing office is currently moving forward with, planning for first year contracts. It's possible that it will be doubles, and then the questions kind of waver on either side of like, well, what about triples or what about singles? And, Megan and I aren't really part of those conversations. So we totally have the same questions you do. But we want to let you know that it is being talked about and thought about, especially by the housing office. So, keep your ears peeled for their information. Part of why we wanted to talk about housing is there is a CCS house, and that is something that has existed for many, many years, and traditionally has been in a dorm called Pendola, but might be moving this year to Santa Rosa. And so we're talking to housing about that. But Michelle, I believe you lived in Pendola, and so you can kind of talk about what it was like. And that I think will sort of half answer Jake's question about like, do you get to, interact with physics students and like just work on physics problems together and things like that?
Yeah, I lived in Pendola my freshman year, and that's a house in Manzanita Village, one of the dorms at UCSB, and I loved Pendola. Most of the students in there were CCS students, but we did have some non-CCS students who ended up there. But it was very much a great community to be in. And it was a lot like the CCS building, which is where you can also encounter other CCS students, because CCS students have had 24/7 access to the building. And after all the classes are done, we just go there and study. So Pendola is kind of like a satellite of that. There's a few study rooms in the building and a lot of whiteboards. So a lot of students would just hang out and do their homework together or have board game nights. And yes, I did take a few physics classes in my freshman year, and I did go to some physics majors being like, hello, can you explain stuff like acceleration to me? Because I've never taken a physics class before. And that was really awesome. But besides academic stuff, we did also have a lot of fun doing more fun, like, yeah, board game nights, movie nights, just hanging out and chatting about our day and how we're doing. I loved the CCS community in Pendola and met a lot of my friends there who I am still friends with, and still they have been my housemates for the past few years, even after I moved out of the dorms. And I think it's a great way to build your support system, but you also do not have to live in Pendola to meet a ton of CCS students. And it's also great to just build your support system with, I mean, anyone at UCSB. But yeah, I really think so fondly of my time in freshman year because everyone's excited and wants to make friends. And I remember sometimes just in the middle of the night, all the physics majors would be like collaborating together on their homework sessions because they're encouraged to collaborate together, and they had like weekly problem sets, and they would just be like writing up on the whiteboards. And I was like, I don't understand this, but they're really nice and explain things to me. So everyone is very friendly, and a lot of great conversations come out of just hanging around the CCS building as well, because everyone's interests are we often have very specific interests. So you learn a lot of fun facts from people, but yeah, it's awesome.
I think this is actually a really good time to wrap up and say thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to get specific a little bit and get nitty gritty, but also, to help answer those big picture questions. So we appreciate your time and interest, and let us know if there's anything else that we can do to help answer your questions about CCS, about what it's like to be a student here, because we really want to help you feel confident that if you choose CCS, that you are making the right decision for you, because we are looking forward to getting to know you really well for the next 4 years. And so we want you to be confident and excited that we are the right fit for you.